survived a storm. She wasn't sure she had wanted to escape outside. The rain intensified, hammering against the windows with relentless ferocity. But within Laura, a far greater tempest raged, threatening to unravel everything she had once held firm. The walls she had built around herself were crumbling, and she couldn't tell if she had the strength or the desire to rebuild them. The rain no longer whispered. It roared against the villa's roof like an unrelenting tempest, amplifying every unease in Laura's chest. She sat curled on the old armchair in the dimly lit living room, her hands clutching the hem of her dress, as though letting go would send her spiraling into a storm of emotions. The memories of what had transpired with Johnny haunted her, sharp and unrelenting like a wound that refused to heal. Footsteps echoed from the hallway. Firm and deliberate, Laura looked up, her heart sinking, when she saw CLA, the only friend she had ever truly trusted, standing in the doorway. CLA's piercing eyes, sharp as a blade, swept over Laura before settling on the staircase leading to Johnny's room. Without saying a word, Claire entered, set her bag on the table and poured herself a cup of tea, her movements deliberate and calculated. Laura CLA finally spoke, her voice calm, but carrying an undercurrent of something unspoken. "You look like you've just been through a storm. Is there something you want to tell me?" Laura bit her lip, struggling to keep her composure. "It's nothing the weather. It's been rough and I haven't been feeling well." CLA smirked, a fleeting, hollow expression, devoid of warmth. "Is that so? Because I can't help but feel there's something more to it." She sipped her tea, her eyes never leaving Laura, like "There's something you're hiding." Laura froze, pinned to her seat by the weight of Clay's words. They weren't an accusation, but they hit their mark, striking at the fears Laura had been trying to bury before she could respond. CLA set her cup down, leaned forward, and fixed Laura with an icy stare. "I saw Johnny coming out of here last night." CLA said her words, landing heavy like the rain outside. "Do you care to explain why?" Laura's heart stopped, her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She knew CLA was too astute to be deceived. Her friend's unwavering gaze seemed to unravel every thread of the facade Laura had so carefully constructed, and now Claire was waiting for her to confess. "What are you thinking, Laura?" CLA pressed, her voice cutting like a knife. "Do you even realize what you're doing? Johnny is Ethan's son. He's the son of your ex-husband." "CLA, that's enough." Laura tried to protest, but her voice came out weak, unconvincing. Even to herself, enough. CLA's laugh was short, bitter. "I always thought you were stronger than this, Laura, but now I don't know what you're doing with your life." Laura couldn't bear Cla's gaze any longer. She stood abruptly, intending to flee, but CLA grabbed her wrist, her expression fierce with resolve. "Where do you think this is going?" CLA demanded, her voice low, but weighted with intensity. "Do you think Johnny is just a boy? He's not, he's a man, and you've crossed a line no one will forgive." Before Laura could respond, a loud noise from the staircase broke the tense silence. Both women turned to see Johnny standing there, his face pale, his eyes dark with hurt and anger. It was clear he had heard everything. Johnny Laura's voice trembled, barely audible. "What do you think I am?" Johnny asked, his voice thick with disappointment. "A mistake you want to forget, or a game you're playing to escape your miserable life?" Laura felt the weight of his words like a physical blow. She wanted to explain, to tell him it wasn't what he thought, but the look in his eyes told her he wouldn't listen. CLA remained silent, her sharp eyes observing everything but withholding any further words. She seemed to have decided to step back, leaving Laura and Johnny to face the consequences of what had unfolded. As CLA left the room, the sound of the door closing behind her rang like a funeral bell, marking the collapse of everything Laura had tried to hold together. Johnny descended the stairs slowly, his gaze fixed on Laura with unrelenting intensity. "You want me to leave, don't you?" he said, his voice low, laced with bitterness. "Fine, I'll go, but don't expect me to come back." "Johnny, wait," Laura pleaded. But he was already at the door without looking back. He stepped out into the pouring rain and disappeared into the night. Laura stood frozen, her world crumbling around her. The rain outside grew heavier, pounding against the windows as if trying to wash everything away. But Laura knew that what had happened couldn't be erased. She had crossed a line, and now she had to face the consequences. Not just with Johnny, but with herself. As the storm raged on the walls of the villa, seemed to close in on her, leaving her with nothing but the echoes of her choices and the haunting realization that some storms couldn't be weathered. The lakeside villa lay shrouded in darkness, broken only by the relentless pounding of the rain on the roof and the eerie whistle of wind through the cracks in the doors. Laura sat in the living room clutching a cold cup of coffee as though it were her last lifeline. She hadn't moved from the chair since Johnny had stormed out. The echo of his retreating footsteps still lingered in her mind, a haunting farewell. She never wanted to hear everything around her, now felt like shards, fragments of her life, of emotions she never should have allowed herself to fall into. Suddenly the front door swung open, letting in a gust of icy wind that made Laura flinch. She turned quickly, but it wasn't Johnny, it was CLA. CLA entered briskly, her expression stone cold, her sharp eyes carrying the weight of a decision already made. Laura opened her mouth to speak, but her throat constricted, words failing her. "We need to talk," CLA said, her voice steady and commanding. Laura said nothing, watching as Claire approached. She knew there was nothing left to explain. CLA placed a folder on the table and sat down, her movements deliberate and unyielding. "Do you know what bothers me the most?" CLA began, her tone laced with controlled anger. "It's not just what happened between you and Johnny, though that's bad enough. It's that you let yourself get caught in something you knew would destroy you. You both." Laura hesitated before opening the folder. Inside were photos, grainy but unmistakable, of her and Johnny captured from a distance. Moments she thought no one could have seen, but it was the final photo that made her blood run cold. Ethan, her ex-husband, standing outside the villa staring at them through the window. "He knows," CLA said, her voice like ice. "Ethan has been watching you, if he hasn't acted yet. It's only because he's waiting for the right moment." Laura felt as though the air had been sucked from the room. Her chest tightened, her mind racing. Ethan, the man she once loved, the man she had tried to build a life with, was now a shadow hanging over her. "Every move you need to leave, Laura," CLA continued, her tone softening, but no less resolute, not for Johnny's sake, but for your own. "If Ethan decides to act, you won't get a second chance." Laura looked at her friend, tears brimming in her eyes. "But what about Johnny?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "He's all I have left." CLA shook her head gently, her expression both sympathetic and firm. "He can't be everything, Laura, and he needs to find his own way to heal. Just as you do, you've crossed lines that can't be undone, but you still have a chance to start over somewhere far from here." Laura sat in silence, the weight of CLA's words crushing her deep down. She knew her friend was right. She had to leave. But the thought of abandoning Johnny, of leaving behind the only connection that had made her feel alive, was unbearable. Her heart ached in a way she hadn't thought possible. The next morning, Laura packed her belongings. She left a letter on the table, its words brief but heavy. "Johnny, I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I hope you live a life I cannot destroy. Don't come looking for me, because I've chosen to leave. Not because I want to, but because I must." Laura, as her car rolled away from the villa. Laura glanced in the rearview mirror. The lake lay eerily still, its surface betraying none of the turmoil beneath. But she knew beneath that serene facade, the undercurrents never truly rested. A few days later, CLA received a phone call. Ethan's voice came through calm but tinged with an unsettling edge. "She's gone, isn't she?" he said. "Laura did the right thing, but Johnny's still there. Do you think I'll just let this go?" CLA froze, her breath catching in her throat. Ethan's words carried a weight she knew all too well. He was not one to make idle threats, but before she could respond, he hung up, leaving only the chilling silence of the deadline. And so the story ends, or so it seems. But for those watching, the questions linger like a storm refusing to pass. What will Ethan do next? How will Johnny react when he finds Laura's letter? And Laura, has she truly escaped the shadow of her choices, or is this just the prelude to a far greater tragedy?